Recently, I was watching a clip from the Tincast IRL podcast where they were talking about how men are walking away from dating and relationships. And Dr. Drew, who was one of the guests, did what so many of the so-called experts do, which is to blame it on the men and blame it on porn. Let's watch a short clip.
So, for example, let's talk about relationships. I think it's about a third of young men 18 to 30 have never had one.
Yeah, it's crazy.
They're
It's
virgins
horrible.
all
This
through
is a horrible, horrible thing.
Yeah, and the reason it's been outsourced to things like dating apps, and I've been very anti-dating app despite...
Pornography is really what's taken over.
Now, I have no beef with Dr. Drew and, in fact, agree with a lot of what he has to say. But he's falling into an ongoing trend that you'll often hear from these so-called experts, especially ones who are on the right side of things, if you catch my drift. And while it sounds good, while it feels good, while it may even make sense to the uneducated and misinformed, the fact is porn isn't the cause of men walking away. It's a symptom of it. Men aren't walking away because of porn. They are using porn because they've walked away. And we're going to examine that dynamic and show how the experts have it all wrong. I want to challenge something that you've probably heard 100 times before. Men, especially the younger ones, are addicted to porn. That's the reason they're withdrawing from relationships. That's why marriage rates are down. That's why men aren't stepping up. Yeah, no. That's not just wrong, it's completely backwards. Porn isn't the cause, it's the symptom. It's the reaction, not the disease. It's not what's turning men away from women dating and commitment. It's what men are turning to because of how dangerous and dysfunctional dating, relationships, and modern gender dynamics have become for men. And it speaks to how we as a society, especially the so-called experts, can't seem to get out of their misandrist mindset, their misandrist beliefs. You know, the ones that seek to put the entire blame on men and absolve women of any responsibility or accountability for their words, deeds, and actions. Mainstream psychologists, doctors, and media pundits keep blaming porn for the breakdown of relationships, as if it's some sort of villain corrupting an entire generation of men. They say it's ruining men's ability to connect, making them lazy, emotionally stunted, and of course, addicted to fantasy. And to be fair, I do think there is a grain of truth in that. But it isn't the root cause of the problem. In fact, it's not a cause of the problem at all. As I said, it's a reaction to a problem created by society, by feminism and women on social media, by politicians, Hollywood, and the talking heads of the media, all of whom have promulgated the anti-male narrative for decades now. But see, to admit that would prove their lie, prove their hate. So instead they do what they've always done. Blame the victim. Blame the men. So why have men really turned to porn? Well, that's the conversation they don't want to have, because the reality is that men really weren't left with any other choice. Yeah, you heard that right. In a manner of speaking, men have been forced to turn to porn to fulfill their most basic human needs. Because the other way to fulfill them is now fraught with danger, fraught with stress and anxiety, fraught with potential destruction of their reputation, their ability to earn a living, their very existence. We've reached a point where the risk of false allegations, which are rampant, are only continuing to grow. And of course, the accompanying risk of going to prison for simply approaching a woman to say hi and her deciding you're a creep, which is simply too great to ignore. And add to it the very real fact that well over 50% of all marriages end in divorce, and men lose everything, including access to their home and children in the process. That is the reality, and it's why we don't want to talk about it. And it's also exactly why so many men are now choosing porn over real relationships in the first place. Look, I'm not saying this is a good thing. In fact, I think it's a very, very bad thing for men, for women, for society as a whole. But when you look at the fact that it's easier, cheaper, and most of all, safer to pay some chick $10 on OF rather than shell out hundreds on a date, or God forbid, get married or divorced, or having to face a false allegation of abuse, sexual assault, or harassment, the fact is it's actually the smart, prudent thing to do. It's the logical, reasoned thing to do. And let's be clear also, men didn't create that dynamic. Women and society did. Did with the Me Too and Believe All Women movements, which have led to weaponized false allegations. Did with creating a family court system that treats men as nothing more than wallets to be pillaged. Did with the rampant, never-ending vilification of men, 24/7, 365, for decades now. That is why millions of men are choosing to opt out of real-life relationships altogether. Not porn. But again, no one wants to talk about that. Nope, it's easier to just blame the men. Blame the porn and then wash their hands of any responsibility or accountability. And again, I don't think this is a good thing. In fact, I think it's going to lead to the end of our society as we know it. But again, really, what other option is there for men today? Because what's waiting for them in the real world is disrespect, rejection, false allegations, financial risk, emotional manipulation. There's getting doxxed and having your reputation destroyed on social media because some chick decided she didn't like you or you had a bad first date. Things that happen to men all day, every day. Yet, things we've put our blinders on so that we can ignore it. The question we should be asking is, why are we allowing all of that? And why are we ignoring it? And instead, blaming the men for doing the right thing, the prudent thing, the smart, rational thing, which is avoiding it. If dating and relationships were safe, fulfilling, and respectful, most men would drop porn in a heartbeat. Men would much rather be in a loving relationship with a woman, but we've created a society where the better option is to have one with your hand. It's actually mind-boggling how they just don't get it. How they cannot understand how the game is rigged against men. How they cannot understand that smart, decent men aren't going to continue to play that game. I mean, really, are they that lazy? Are they that stupid? Why is it any surprise at all that those realities exist and that those realities are very real and omnipresent for men? And it's why those men are not going to continue to play the game and instead have chosen to walk away. The answer is because they don't think men should have the right to walk away. Because we as a society don't see men as having value, as having any worth other than to be sacrificed for the greater good of women and society as a whole. We don't see men as human beings. We see them as something to be used and discarded like an old tire or tampon. Let's be brutally honest. Dating in 2025 is a minefield for women. For sure. But it is far more so for men. Ask any guy who's been on the apps. You're expected to pay for everything, plan the date, impress her, entertain her, and what do you get in return? Most likely ghosted. Or if you're lucky, a text that says, "I'm just not feeling the vibe," 48 hours later. At best, you end up being on her roster with 5 other guys where she'll just use you occasionally for foodie dates and validation. Or maybe she'll use you as cannon fodder for her clicks and likes from her Insta following. Hashtag, he's a creep. Hashtag, he only did the bare minimum. Hashtag, it's all men. And that's assuming you even get a date. Most men don't. The data shows women swipe right on less than 10% of men, most of whom wouldn't give those women a second glance. He's a 10, darling. What makes you think he wants to be in a relationship or to marry you when you're a 2? Yet, that's exactly what today's women think is going to happen. That perfect 10 guy is going to want them and wife them up, when at best, he'll just hit it and quit it. More likely, though, he'll just swipe left himself and move on to another actual 10, leaving her angry and bitter at being rejected. How dare a man do that to me? It's all of them. It's why women's expectations have gone through the roof, have become not just unrealistic, but downright delusional. She wants a man who's over 6 feet tall, making six figures with six-pack abs and a 6-inch you-know-what. One who's also emotionally available, but only to the right amount, and masculine, but not too masculine. One who's ambitious and hard-working, but doesn't work too much so that he has enough free time to focus on her and her needs. And if you don't meet all of those, don't meet any of them, or only one or two, well, tough luck, Buster. You're not a real man. You're just an incel loser. What sane person would put themselves out there to deal with that? What sane person wouldn't rather spend $10 on OnlyFans than spend hundreds of dollars on a dinner date only to be used, ghosted, humiliated, and doxxed? Yet, that's exactly what these experts, women in general, and society demand. That men offer themselves up for sacrifice, and then blame them and their porn addiction when they don't. And let's dive a little deeper into the other can of worms that they don't want to open. You know, the part that no one ever talks about, which I alluded to before. The very real legal and reputational risks of dating. We are at the point where one bad night, one false accusation, one misunderstanding or assumption created out of thin air by a woman, and the man's life is destroyed. Not because he actually did anything wrong, but simply because she decided he did. He'll lose everything, not just his job, not just his social circle, but his freedom, his future, quite possibly even his very life, considering how prison justice works. And it can all happen in the blink of an eye based solely on her word. Based solely on some fantasy she's concocted in her brain. No proof required, no due process. Just an allegation, just her word. In today's culture, that's enough to label a man for life. And men, at least the smart ones, know it. So let's be real. If porn fulfills the same basic outlet, at least biologically speaking, without the risk of being falsely accused, without being manipulated, cheated on, or divorced, and cleaned out, can you really blame men for opting for it? Would you blame the male survivors of the Titanic for getting in the lifeboats instead of drowning in the frigid ocean? Oh, right. We already know the answer to that one, don't we? Yes. Yes, you would. Again, that's what the media, the politicians, women in society as a whole, not just expect, but demand. That it's women and children first. So you men, get the hell out of the lifeboats because you aren't worthy enough to deserve to be in them. And another thing these so-called experts like Dr. Drew get wrong all the time, this isn't about hating women. It's not about being bitter or lonely. It's not about being red-pilled or part of the manosphere. It's about doing the math. It's about doing the calculations, the analysis, and understanding the risk versus reward. And the absolute fact for men these days is it's all risk with virtually no chance of reward. Yet, instead of listening to men, instead of heeding what they're saying, we choose to blame them. We target them. We insult them and their intelligence. And then wonder why the problem keeps getting worse. Modern men aren't giving up on love. They're giving up on being doormats. Giving up on being disposable. They're putting themselves first, as they should. And they're protecting themselves. Protecting themselves from predatory women in a society that supports them. They're looking at a system that offers minimal benefits and maximum consequences and saying, no thanks. We'll just go enjoy life on our own terms. And if that means that we have to satisfy our biological needs by looking at some naughty pictures with our friend Rosie the Palm, so be it. Again, I'm not saying this is a good thing, not by a long shot. It is very bad, but it is the smart, rational, logical thing to do. Would you keep playing a game where the rules keep changing, the referee is biased, and the prize gets smaller every year? Because that's what modern relationships feel like and indeed are for men these days. And porn, for all its downsides, and to be sure there are many, at least doesn't lie to you. It isn't going to call you a creep or try to put you in prison. It isn't going to take your kids and money and then label you as a deadbeat. Let me reiterate and be perfectly clear here. Porn isn't good for men. It's not healthy to live in isolation, to replace intimacy with a screen, to settle for fantasy over connection. But it's a better, far, far better alternative, at least in the current climate. The real tragedy here, as I've said time and again, it's not just the men who will lose. Women lose too, perhaps even more so than men. And most of all, society loses. Society collapses. Families never get formed. Children don't get born. Loneliness and isolation become the norm for everyone. Everyone stops caring about anything. And I hate to break it to you, friends, but it's not coming. It's already here. And all because no one wants to take an honest look at why men are opting out of relationships and opting out of society. No one wants to listen to them, to hear them. Instead, they just want to ignore them and, of course, blame them. So the next time someone says men are addicted to porn, ask them this. What exactly are men supposed to be addicted to instead? Getting abused? Getting insulted? Getting mocked and ridiculed? Getting used and taken advantage of over and over again? Are they supposed to joyfully participate in a dating market that insults them, devalues them, uses them, and then discards them, not just once, but over and over again? Are they supposed to support a climate and culture that punishes and blames masculinity, that assumes guilt, not based on who they are as a person or anything they've done, but solely based on something that happens to be between their legs? Are they supposed to sign up and support a system that offers them not even a modicum of loyalty or appreciation in return? The answer is, for most of society, yes. Yes, they should. Because we don't care about men, don't see them as worthy, don't even see them as human beings. Maybe porn isn't the answer, but let's stop pretending it's the problem, shall we? Because until we fix the environment that men are retreating from, you can't blame them for what they retreat to. Porn is just a symptom. And if we don't start addressing the disease and a culture that treats men like disposable wallets and predators in waiting, then these things are only going to get worse. Not just for men, but for everyone. So what do you think? Is porn the symptom or the cause? What other options do men have? Do they have any? And what should women do? Should they accept their role in it all or continue to just keep hurling lame insults like calling the men who reject them incels or gay? Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, do me a favor and give me a like and share it with a friend. And if you aren't already, and about 3/4 of you who are watching this aren't, hit that subscribe button and notification bell and become part of the Men Need to Be Heard community. A community focused on addressing the inequalities that men face in a world that doesn't value them. All right, till next time, this is Dan. Have an awesome day.